This is a CBS News special report. I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington. President Biden is about to deliver remarks in the White House Rose Garden to talk about a U.S.-brokered ceasefire deal between Israel and Iran-backed Hezbollah, Lebanon. Let's listen in.
Between Israel and Hezbollah. I want to thank President Macron of France for his partnership in reaching this moment. For nearly 14 months, a deadly conflict raged across the border that separates Israel and Lebanon. A conflict that began the day after the October 7 attack by Hamas on Israel. Hours later, at 2 a.m. in the morning, Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations backed by Iran attacked Israel in support of Hamas. Let's be clear, Israel did not launch this war. The Lebanese people did not seek that war either, nor did the United States. Over the past year, including in the days immediately following October the 7th, I directed the U.S. military to flow assets and capabilities into the region, including aircraft carriers, fighter squadrons, and sophisticated air defense battery to defend Israel and deter our common enemy at critical moments. Since the war with Hezbollah began, over 70,000 Israelis have been forced to live as refugees in their own country, helplessly watching their homes, their businesses, their communities as they're bombarded and destroyed. And over 300,000 Lebanese people have also been forced to live as refugees in their own country. And a war imposed on them by Hezbollah. All told, this has been the deadliest conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in decades. How many of Hezbollah's senior leaders are dead, including its longtime leader, Nasrallah? And Israel has destroyed Hezbollah's terrorist infrastructure in southern Lebanon as well, including miles of sophisticated tunnels, which were prepared for an October 7-style terrorist attack in northern Israel. But lasting security for the people of Israel and Lebanon cannot be achieved only on the battlefield. And that's why I directed my team to work with the governments of Israel and Lebanon to forge a ceasefire, to bring the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah to a close. Under the deal reached today, effective at 4 a.m. tomorrow local time, the fighting across the Lebanese-Israeli border will end. Will end. This is designed to be a permanent cessation of hostilities. What is left of Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations will not be allowed, I emphasize, will not be allowed to threaten the security of Israel again. Over the next 60 days, the Lebanese army and state security forces will deploy and take control of their own territory once again. Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure in southern Lebanon will not be allowed to be rebuilt. And over the next 60 days, Israel will gradually withdraw its remaining forces. And civilians on both sides will soon be able to safely return to their communities and begin to rebuild their homes, their schools, their farms, their businesses, and their very lives. We're determined this conflict will not be just another cycle of violence. And so the United States, with the full support of France and our other allies, has pledged to work with Israel and Lebanon to ensure that this arrangement is fully implemented, the agreement totally implemented. There will be no U.S. troops deployed in southern Lebanon. This is consistent with my commitment to the American people to not put U.S. troops in combat in this conflict. Instead, we, along with France and others, will provide the necessary assistance to make sure this deal is implemented fully and effectively. Let me be clear. If Hezbollah or anyone else breaks the deal and poses a direct threat to Israel, then Israel retains the right to self-defense consistent with international law, just like any country when facing a terrorist group pledged to that country's destruction. At the same time, this deal supports Lebanon's sovereignty, and so it heralds a new start for Lebanon, a country that I've seen most of over the years, a country with rich history and culture. If fully implemented, this deal can put Lebanon on a path toward a future that's worthy of its significant past. And just as the Lebanese people deserve a future of security and prosperity, so do the people of Gaza. They too deserve an end to the fighting and displacement. The people of Gaza have been through hell. Their world's absolutely shattered. Far too many civilians in Gaza have suffered, far too much. And Hamas has refused for months and months to negotiate a good faith ceasefire and a hostage deal. And so now Hamas has a choice to make. Their only way out is to release the hostages, including American citizens, which they hold. In the process, bring an end to the fighting, which would make possible a surge of humanitarian relief. Over the coming days, the United States will make another push with Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, Israel, and others to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza. With the hostages released and the end of the war without Hamas in power, that becomes possible. As for the broader Middle East region, today's announcement brings us closer to realizing the affirmative agenda that I've been pushing forward during my entire presidency. A vision for the future of the Middle East where it's at peace and prosperous and integrated across borders. A future where Palestinians have a state of their own, one that fulfills its people's legitimate aspirations, one that cannot threaten Israel or harbor terrorist groups with backing from Iran. A future where Israelis and Palestinians enjoy equal measures of security, prosperity, and yes, dignity. To that end, the United States remains prepared to conclude a set of historic deals with Saudi Arabia, to include a security pact and economic assurances, together with a credible pathway for establishing a Palestinian state and the full normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, a desire they both have. I believe this agenda remains possible, and in my remaining time in office, I'll work tirelessly to advance this vision for an integrated, secure, and prosperous region, all of which strengthens America's national security. Getting all this done will require making some hard choices. Israel has been bold on the battlefield. Iran and its proxies have paid a very heavy price. Now Israel must be bold in turning tactical gains against Iran and its proxies into a coherent strategy that secure Israel's long-term safety and advances a broader peace and prosperity in the region. Today's announcement is a critical step in advancing that vision. And so I applaud the crazy decision made by the leaders of Lebanon and Israel to end the violence. It reminds us that peace is possible. Say that again, peace is possible. As long as that is the case, I will not for a single moment stop working to achieve it. God bless you all, and sorry to keep you waiting so long. May God protect our troops. Thank you.
Mr. President, will you get a ceasefire in Gaza before leaving office?
Ask me how I get a ceasefire, and I think so. I'm hoping, praying.
How is this push any different from the previous ones?
You don't see that. It should be reported. What?
Mr. President, what have you told the new administration?
So President Biden taking some questions there at the end, very difficult to hear his responses about the potential for a ceasefire in Gaza. But the big news that he announced there in the Rose Garden today was that a long-sought ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon has now been reached with the help of U.S. negotiators, potentially ending the deadliest conflict between Hezbollah and Israel in decades after more than a year of fighting. The president said the fighting will end tomorrow morning. He said that the ceasefire will last 60 days and that Israel will use that time to withdraw its forces from southern Lebanon. Hezbollah, he said, will not be allowed to rebuild there. And he noted that the ceasefire does not apply to the ongoing conflict in Gaza with Hamas. Let's bring in Face the Nation moderator and Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Margaret Brennan. Margaret, this was a ceasefire that was months, if not a year in the making. What was the key to finally getting it done?
The timing was right for the Israeli Prime Minister, who according to U.S. officials I've spoke with, assessed that he didn't want to keep Israeli troops in that 3 to 4 kilometer space of southern Lebanon for a long time and gain risk that comes with it. He also was under tremendous domestic political pressure at home. There are an estimated 70 to 80,000 Israelis who have been unable to return to their homes in the north of that country since October 8th and the beginning of those rocket attacks that started a year or so ago. There's also the very real world assessment that the military gains that Israel has achieved in terms of dramatically weakening the leadership of Hezbollah, killing their leader, very strategic, powerful leader, Hassan Nasrallah, and also demonstrating how weak the state of Iran, the proxy, Hezbollah is a proxy force of Iran, Iran's their chief sponsor, how weak the state of Iran has become. Iran had to agree to this. That shows quite a lot in terms of where we are with a dramatically weakened sponsor in Iran, a dramatically weakened proxy force with Hezbollah, and that's what led us to today. And it was President Biden's U.S. envoy, Amos Hochstein, who has been working this for months and months and finally got it over the line today.
What, if anything, does this deal mean for the long-stalled ceasefire that is being sought between Israel and Hamas in Gaza?
That is a much harder problem to solve. The trigger time at 4 a.m. Eastern or 4 a.m. local in Lebanon will silence those guns, but the guns will continue going in Gaza. More than 44,000 Palestinians estimated to have been killed, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. There is no immediate hope of a breakthrough there. The political calculus is also much more complicated for the Israeli prime minister as he assesses what to do next and may be waiting to see what President Trump may allow him to do since they have a close relationship. The far-right government in Israel is putting a lot of pressure on Mr. Netanyahu to even potentially consider annexing Gaza, something that U.S. officials don't think he is likely to do at this point, but he has perhaps more leeway come January. So the short answer is not a lot happens on the ground in Gaza, but at least on paper, it looks like Hamas is more isolated since Hezbollah will be standing aside.
And we heard President Biden say there in the Rose Garden that the only hope for Hamas is to now release the remaining Israeli hostages. I want to go now to foreign correspondent Deborah Pata. She is in East Jerusalem. Deborah, let's just take a step back and talk to us about the scope of this conflict that you have reported on consistently over the past year. Why did it start, and how widespread is the devastation from the fighting that has continued right up until today?
Well, as we know, that this round of fighting, if you want, in the Middle East, I mean, this is a decades-long conflict, began with the October 7 attack by Hamas. The day after that, Hezbollah launched attacks on Israel in solidarity with Hamas. As Israel continued its war with Hamas, Hezbollah said that they would continue to strike Israel as well in solidarity. That has now been decoupled because there is no ceasefire in Gaza, and Hezbollah has now agreed to this particular ceasefire. The ceasefire deal has been approved by Israel's cabinet. 10 of its members voted for it, but significantly, one person voted against it, and that's Ben Gvir, who is a far-right member and an ally of Netanyahu. But Netanyahu had enough votes, so he was able to push this through. As Margaret was mentioning there, a deal in Gaza is going to be far, far more difficult. In fact, we spoke to an analyst today who said that they believe that Israel will be in Gaza for the foreseeable future. But Netanyahu went on national TV today, spoke about the gains that they have made over the past year. He says that Israel most significantly retains the right to strike back if Hezbollah violates the ceasefire and tries to rearm. That was a very, very important part of making this deal happen, and something that Israel is going to be very pleased about. But of course, the real test is going to be on the ground. It's been over a year of fighting. Hezbollah and Israel have been trading fire throughout that time, but in the past 2 months, it exploded into a full-out war. And we saw that pager attack, which these thousands of pagers exploded simultaneously killing over 40 people and wounding over 3,000. And now the issue will be the displacement, trying to get people home in Lebanon and here in Israel back to the north.
And Deborah, declaring a ceasefire is one thing, upholding it is another. And these two nations will be tested early on as they work to implement the ceasefire. What are some early tripwires that they could cross?
Well, the implementation of this deal is going to be monitored by a five-nation committee, which includes the US and France. But remember that this particular deal is modeled on a very similar one in 2006, which ended that war between Israel and Lebanon. And that deal never held at all after that war lasted about a month long. And as has been pointed out, this is the deadliest war since the civil war ended in Lebanon in 1990. So upholding it is going to be a very, very difficult one. There is 60 days during which Israel will withdraw from Lebanon and Hezbollah will move back north of the Litani River. That's going to be a very fraught time. It doesn't look as if people will return to the north of Israel or to the south of Lebanon for any time soon, because they're going to be waiting to see whether or not this deal does indeed hold.
So many citizens displaced. Deborah Pata in East Jerusalem, thanks so much. Once again, President Biden just confirmed Israel and militant Hezbollah forces in Lebanon have agreed to a ceasefire deal. This full and permanent ceasefire would bring an end to more than a year of violence between the two countries. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington.